Welcome to the Am I Free to Go podcast, where the Constitution isn't just paper, it's ammo. I'm your host, Soundrone, with Soundbite News Media. Here on the podcast, we don't just talk about your rights. We lock, load, and defend them. We expose censorship, spotlight real amendment battles, and bring you the stories the mainstream's too scared to touch. So whether you're behind a mic, behind a badge, or behind enemy lines on social media, this is your front line in the fight for free speech. Strap in, speak up, and never ask permission, because around here, we know the truth. You are free to go. Episode 001. Understanding First Amendment audits. First Amendment audits are when individuals record in public to challenge and affirm their constitutional rights, especially freedom of speech and the press. This episode explores how officials should respond, explains the difference between public and private property rights, and dives into this ongoing debate. Are these audits a push for government transparency or a form of provocation or even monetization?
Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you're going about your day, maybe in your town hall, the library, even just outside a police station, and you see someone with a camera very deliberately filming everything and everyone.
Right, these are often called First Amendment auditors.
Exactly. And it can be, well, a bit jarring depending on how it's happening.
For sure. It raises a lot of questions immediately.
It does. And there's so much packed into that act of filming. We've got a whole stack of sources here, articles, notes, research that really dig into what these audits are.
The rights involved for, everyone?
Yeah, on all sides. And crucially, how these encounters often play out, between the auditors, public employees, sometimes law enforcement gets involved.
So our mission, really, in this deep dive is to guide you through all that material. We're going to pull out the most important points, the key takeaways.
And maybe some surprising facts that jumped out from the sources.
Exactly.
All right, so based on these sources, let's start at the beginning. What exactly is a First Amendment audit?
Well, the sources define them pretty clearly. At their core, it's individuals filming public employees, officials, sometimes even private citizens.
But the key is they're on public property when this happens.
That's the key geographical distinction, yes. While they're on public property.
And it's not just random filming, is it? There's a stated purpose.
Right. The sources lay out a few stated goals. One is testing if people, officials mainly, respect the right to film in public.
Okay, testing the waters.
Yeah, and promoting transparency in government, seeing how things operate, and acting as a form of, citizen journalism.
Yeah.
Holding institutions accountable.
So walk us through what that typically looks like according to the material we reviewed.
The usual approach, the sources say, is an auditor goes into a public space, could be a lobby, a sidewalk outside a building.
Camera already rolling.
Often, yes. Camera in hand, actively recording. They film openly, maybe ask some questions of employees or officials.
But they don't necessarily introduce themselves or say, hi, I'm doing a First Amendment audit.
Not usually, no. They often don't volunteer who they are or give a specific reason why they're filming, unless asked, and sometimes not even then.
And this whole thing leads to this idea of a pass or a fail for the place being audited.
Precisely. That's the framework many use. A place passes if the auditor films without any issues, no confrontations.
Business as usual.
Right. It fails if employees or officials try to stop them, get aggressive, maybe threaten them, or kick them out just for recording.
So the reaction is really what's being documented.
In large part, yes. The reaction itself becomes the story or a key part of it.
Now, the sources gave some history, some examples. This isn't totally brand new, right? Even if the term First Amendment audit feels more recent.
That's a great point. The source is connected to a broader history. Think about the 1991 Rodney King recording.
Yeah. Huge impact.
Massive. A bystander video that completely changed the conversation led to real consequences. That's cited as a kind of ancestor to this idea of citizen recording for accountability.
That historical context is really important. What about more recent examples from the sources?
Well, they mentioned things like filming ballot drop boxes. That caused a stir. Some saw it as intimidation, not observation.
Right, that was controversial.
Definitely. And also the rise of cop watching channels online. These videos of police encounters have actually led to disciplinary actions for hundreds of officers nationally.
Really? Hundreds?
Yeah, and a few even lost their jobs directly because of recordings that went public. So it shows this can have tangible effects on accountability.
Okay, so there's a strong argument for transparency, accountability, backed up by history. But as you said, it's controversial. The sources definitely highlight that. Why?
This is where the tension really comes in. According to the sources, critics argue that some auditors aren't just observing. They might use tactics that seem designed to provoke.
Like what?
Like being deliberately evasive, refusing to answer simple questions, maybe making provocative statements, basically trying to get a reaction.
Trying to trigger that fail you mentioned earlier to get more dramatic footage.
That's the criticism, yes. And the sources dig into a potential reason for that.
Which is?
Money. Monetization. The sources point out that these audit videos can generate significant income.
How? Ads on YouTube? Donations?
Both. Ad revenue, viewer donations, and this creates an incentive potentially where more confrontational, more inflamed interactions get more views.
More views mean more money.
Exactly. So that financial angle might push some auditors towards provoking conflict rather than just quietly documenting.
So it shifts from observation to maybe performance for clicks?
That's a major concern raised in the material, yeah. It adds a layer of complexity to the stated transparency goals. And importantly, the sources also note that sometimes auditors do cross lines.
Legal lines.
Yes. While testing rights is one thing, some actions break the law or create safety risks. The sources mention an Arizona YouTuber, for instance, who was actually convicted of cyberstalking an employee after filming and, well, harassing them over time.
Okay, so that's a clear example where exercising a right went too far into illegal activity. So, with all this context, let's get into the legal side. What do the sources say about the actual right to film in public?
Okay, the basic principle, and this comes through really clearly in the sources and the court cases they cite, is that filming and taking photos in public spaces, generally protected by the First Amendment.
Under freedom of speech, freedom of the press.
Both, effectively. It's seen as part of gathering and disseminating information.
And what about specifically filming government officials like police? Have courts addressed that?
Yes, definitely. Federal courts have repeatedly affirmed a citizen's right to film officials, including police, doing their jobs in public.
They've been pretty explicit.
Very. One ruling cited calls it a basic, vital, and well-established liberty. Now, the Supreme Court hasn't tackled just filming officials head-on in a dedicated case, but they have recognized, quote, a paramount public interest in a free flow of information concerning public officials. Filming fits right into that.
Sounds pretty strong. But you said generally protected, so it's not absolute. The sources mention limits, right?
Exactly. Not unlimited.
Yeah.
Big limitation. Non-public spaces. You don't have a right to film where there's a reasonable expectation of privacy. Think private offices within a public building, restrooms, areas closed off to the public.
But you can film into those spaces from a public area.
Generally, yes. If it's visible from where you're legally allowed to be, you can usually record it.
Okay. And even in public areas, can they put rules on filming?
Yes. The sources explain this concept of time, place, and manner restrictions. They have to be reasonable.
What does reasonable mean here?
It means the rules have to align with the space's purpose, like limiting access hours for everyone or banning genuinely disruptive noise levels. But crucially, these rules must be content neutral.
Meaning they can't target you because you're filming or because of what you're filming, like police activity?
Precisely. They can't single out the auditor or their message. And the restrictions can't be, just a way to shut down filming they don't like.
Got it. And filming doesn't give you a right to break other laws.
No, definitely not. The sources are clear. First Amendment protection for filming doesn't cover trespassing, crossing police lines at a crime scene, or materially interfering with what officials are trying to do. Those actions are still illegal.
Makes sense. What about filming private citizens who just happen to be there?
That's an interesting point from the sources. Generally, courts say people in public don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy against being video recorded. You're out in public.
But there's always a but.
Well, the sources bring up publicity rights. If an auditor films a private citizen and then uses their image, their face, their likeness for commercial purposes, like in a monetized video.
Without permission.
Right, without permission. That could violate the person's publicity rights. It's a potential legal issue, especially with monetized content.
Okay, another layer of complexity. Now let's shift to those direct interactions, especially when police show up. What do the sources tell us about your rights then, particularly about ID?
Yeah, this is often where things escalate. First and foremost, the sources hammer home your Fifth Amendment right. The right to remain silent.
You don't have to answer questions.
Generally, no. Not even if you're detained, not even if you're arrested. You can't be punished just for refusing to answer. Now, lying to police is a crime, but silence isn't.
And you can ask for a lawyer?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can clearly state you want to remain silent until you speak with an attorney.
Okay, silence is key. But the ID question, that seems to be a major flashpoint in these videos. Do you have to identify yourself?
It's really complex, and the sources break it down well. There's no, general federal law requiring you to carry ID or show it just because an officer asks.
But there are exceptions.
Yes. Specific circumstances where you do have to identify yourself. The first big one is if you're detained based on reasonable suspicion you've committed, are committing, or are about to commit a crime.
Okay.
And you're in a state with a stop and identify law.
So it depends on the state and the reason for the stop.
Exactly. In those specific states, refusing to ID during a lawful Terry stop, that's the reasonable suspicion stop, can lead to arrest. But the sources specifically know Pennsylvania is not one of those states for reasonable suspicion stops.
Good to know for PA listeners. What if it goes beyond detention to an actual arrest?
If you are lawfully arrested, meaning the police have probable cause, a higher standard than reasonable suspicion, then things change, even in states without stop and identify laws for mere detention.
Like PA.
Right. Refusing to identify yourself after a lawful arrest based on probable cause. That can cause significant problems. They can hold you until they figure out who you are, and it might even lead to additional charges like obstruction.
So detention versus arrest makes a big difference for the ID requirement, generally speaking.
A very big difference. And traffic stops are their own thing too, right?
Yes, separate category. During a lawful traffic stop, you must provide your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance if asked. That's standard pretty much everywhere.
Good clarification.
And the sources mention some other Pennsylvania specifics, besides not being a stop and identify state for just suspicion.
Yeah, two main things. One, PA courts tend to recognize stronger privacy rights generally. And two, a really practical point, PA is a two-party consent state for audio recording.
Meaning,
if you're recording audio, not just video, but the sound everyone involved generally needs a consent. So if you're recording audio of police or anyone else,
you should tell them.
It's legally advisable, yes. Inform them you're recording audio to comply with that two-party consent requirement. Just saying, I'm recording, might cover video, but explicitly mentioning audio is safer in PA.
That's a critical detail for anyone recording here. Okay, let's switch gears slightly. Access to property, government buildings, and these no trespass orders, or NTOs. The sources connect this to public versus private law.
Yeah, it's relevant background. Public law governs the state versus individuals, aiming to protect public interest, often with criminal penalties. Yeah. Private law is between individuals or entities, protecting private interests, usually with monetary damages.
And government property is kind of in between.
It can feel that way. It's public, but the government still acts like a property owner in setting rules for its use. This is where NTOs come in for behavior on government property that's usually open to everyone, like a town hall lobby or a park.
So they can issue an NTO if someone's being disruptive there.
They can, but, and this is a huge takeaway from the sources, that the government's power to ban you from public property with an NTO is limited.
How so? What are the limits?
Several key ones.
Yeah.
First, you generally have a right to be on public property open to the public. So if they want to issue an NTO, you're entitled to due process.
What does due process look like for an NTO?
Okay, according to the sources, it means you must get clear notice explaining the specific reasons, the conduct they want to ban you for. Vague reasons aren't enough.
And you get to respond.
Yes. Critically, you have the right to an opportunity to be heard, to tell your side before the ban takes effect. Unless there's an immediate safety risk, then they can issue it but must give you a prompt hearing right after.
So they can't just kick you out and ban you permanently without explaining why and letting you challenge it.
Not from property generally open to the public, no. That pre-deprivation hearing or prompt post-deprivation hearing in emergencies is vital.
What else limits them?
They need a legitimate reason, and the NTO scope has to be tailored to the problem behavior. It generally can't be retaliation for protected speech, like criticism of the government, unless that speech was unprotected, like true threats, or there's some other compelling reason.
And who actually has the power to issue the NTO? Can any police officer just decide?
Generally, no. The sources stress that usually only the agency that controls the property or someone they specifically authorize can issue the NTO. Police can serve or deliver an NTO that's already been authorized.
But they can't just write one up on the spot themselves.
Typically not at their own discretion, no. The sources even mentioned a Massachusetts state police policy reminding officers of they deliver NTOs. They don't usually issue them independently for state property.
Any other special cases mentioned?
Yes, parents at schools. They have rights related to their child's education, which limits how schools can use NTOs against them. And obviously, NTOs can't be based on discrimination, race, gender, etc.
And there was a specific case, US v. Cordova,
Yeah.
about federal property.
Right. An auditor convicted for filming on federal property against their rules. The case reinforced that government agencies do control their property, even if taxpayer funded. It's still considered the property of another legally.
So agencies can set those time, place, manner rules on their property, and violating them can have consequences.
Exactly. It affirmed their authority as property managers, essentially.
Okay, wow. We've covered a lot what audits are, the controversies, your rights when filming, interacting with police, ID issues, NTOs. Let's try to bring it all together. What does this deep dive really mean for you, the listener?
I think stepping back, looking at all these sources, it really paints a picture of a balancing act, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
You've got the public's right to record to hold officials accountable, which is super important. Against the government's need to keep order, ensure safety, make sure public spaces can function as intended. And then layered on top are your individual rights when you get caught up in these situations.
Right. Whether you're the one filming or you're the official being filmed, or maybe you're just a bystander watching it happen, understanding these boundaries that the sources lay out is pretty crucial.
It helps you navigate those unexpected moments. And knowing the specifics from the sources, especially about your right to stay silent, and when you do or don't have to provide ID, that gives you a much firmer footing.
It feels like this is a space that's constantly shifting, too, especially with technology.
For sure. What really comes through is how easy recording is now and how online platforms amplify everything. It just intensifies that tension we talked about.
The tension between accountability and confrontation.
Exactly. Between genuine oversight and interactions, that might be more about creating conflict for an audience.
Which kind of leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. As cameras get even smaller, more integrated into our lives, and sharing is instant. How is this ongoing dynamic going to keep shaping how we exercise our First Amendment rights in public?
And how are those rights going to be understood and enforced by everyone involved, the public, the auditors, the authorities moving forward? It's definitely something to keep watching.
Thanks for tuning in to the Am I Free to Go podcast. Support the show by checking out our First Amendment gear, wear your rights proudly, and help us keep creating content like this. You can also join us on Patreon for access to uncut videos, outtakes, bloopers, and exclusive audio-only episodes. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell across all our channels. Links are in the description, and most importantly, we love reading your comments. Drop your ideas below, and you might hear your suggestion in a future episode.